This woman thought she had married the man of her dreams, but just a few months after the wedding, her husband gradually began to abuse her. It started with shouting, then shoving, and eventually it turned into full-on violence. In just 1 year, Jisoo's life became a living hell. Because of it, she cut herself off from her family and even from her best friend Ina. One day she decided to flee the country to disappear, so her husband would stop abusing her. But her husband was unhinged. He had money to burn and eyes everywhere. He tracked down Jisoo's mother in a nursing home and sent a photo. One of her mom's fingernails ripped off. He threatened to kill her mother if Jisoo didn't come back immediately, and with no real choice, she returned home and faced more cruelty. He warned her not to try it again, saying it was useless to run. No matter where she went, as long as he was alive, she belonged to him. She is his property. And the most twisted part, when he finished pounding on her, he handed her a bouquet of roses and said, "I love you more than anything in the world." The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Jisoo was in constant pain, but what gutted her the most was that he could beat her and then act as if the world had reset by sunrise. However, her husband's mood changed in an instant. After tasting the juice, he said it was disgusting and warned her to make it better next time. Otherwise, he'd have to punish her again. Jisoo's life was pure hell. As soon as her husband went to work, she could breathe again and locked herself inside a secret hideout she had built to look just like her childhood bedroom. That hidden place was the only spot where she could truly escape reality, imagining a better life. But when he got home, reality snapped back. She started making dinner, but she was so frightened that she dropped the pot on the floor and burned her hand. He noticed and walked toward her as she trembled like an earthquake, and instead of helping, he said, "I hate when my things get ruined." To her surprise, he gave her a hug, which only made her more afraid, and then smiled like the Joker, as if a great idea had just come to him. He bought a security camera to take care of her and watch her while he was out, meaning escape would now be even harder. Over dinner, we learned they were trying for a baby, but Jisoo had recently miscarried because of his brutal assaults. He had the gall to blame her. If she did things right, he wouldn't have to hit her. By daylight, he put on an Oscar-worthy performance for the world, selling a perfect marriage. Every time he beat her, he followed it with a gift. Jisoo was done. Apologies changed nothing. And if she spoke, fists flew, bruises multiplied. He was meticulous, never hitting her face just in case they had to see people, and he always made sure to buy her clothes that covered the marks. The next day they had a commitment, a conference against domestic violence given by his mother. She preached zero tolerance without knowing her own daughter-in-law was being terrorized at home. We also learned Jisoo had tried to report him 3 months earlier, but her husband's sister was a cop, and fear froze her. For that reason, she ran away without giving explanations, and the sister caught up to her because she had noticed her bruises. The cop's sister told her to patch things up as a couple. After all, 90% of domestic violence cases go unpunished. At dinner that same day, the sister mentioned she'd been at the police station. And this was fatal because putting the pieces together, her husband understood she tried to report him for domestic violence. Because of this, when they got home, her husband exploded in rage and made her life a living nightmare, asserting his dominance over her in every possible way. He sentenced her to the kitchen. She wasn't allowed to move until she finished dinner. Her life felt like a prison. Then the doorbell rang. Her best friend had come by. Terrified, Jisoo ignored it rather than be seen with a battered face. But the friend insisted, slid in with a parcel delivery as cover. One look at Jisoo's injuries and she froze. She had no idea. She asked when it started, why Jisoo had stayed silent. Jisoo said to leave it. She had tried reporting him and even tried to leave the country. Nothing worked. She took Ina to the secret hideout, out of the camera's line, where she admitted the truth. He hit her, and he had nearly killed her more than once. Ina wanted to help, but Jisoo said there was nothing to be done. He was untouchable and loaded with cash to buy off corrupt cops. All she wanted, honestly, was one less punch. At that moment, her husband walked into the house, suspicious that someone might be inside. She quickly grabbed her jacket as he went to check every room, while she, terrified and trembling, tried to explain that no one was there. But that didn't stop him from striking her across the face. My God, the pain! The next day, she received an unexpected surprise when a neighbor quietly told her that she could talk to her anytime, especially at night, meaning when her husband was asleep. That could only mean one thing: the neighbor knew about the abuse. That night, her husband took her to an important social event, but not out of kindness. He only wanted to show off his beautiful wife, who almost never got to leave the house, began drinking heavily, desperate to feel some freedom. She drank until she was completely drunk. When her husband noticed, he scolded her, saying that too many people were watching him and ordered her to stop drinking. A man nearby looked at them in confusion. Their behavior didn't seem like that of a normal couple, especially given her husband's aggressive tone. However, as the alcohol took over, Jisoo started criticizing one of the paintings painted by a wealthy woman on the wall, calling it extremely ugly and saying, "It belongs in the trash." The offended woman slapped Jisoo across the face in front of everyone, shocking the entire room. Her husband's expression turned from embarrassment to rage. Jisoo immediately apologized, trembling, knowing what would await her once they were alone. In her panic, she tripped and fell onto the buffet table, causing food and drinks to spill everywhere. The murmurs around them grew louder. People whispered about how poorly their marriage seemed to be going. On the way home, silence filled the car until he finally spoke, his voice dripping with venom. He accused her of humiliating him and losing control, then sped down the highway recklessly as if trying to scare her. Jisoo begged him to slow down, but the faster she pleaded, the harder he pressed the accelerator. They nearly collided with another car before he stopped suddenly and told her coldly to prepare for what's coming. He then dropped her off and returned to the party, determined to repair the social damage she had caused. Shaken and broken, Jisoo went out to the balcony that night and stared at the dark sky. The idea of ending everything crossed her mind. Just then, the door opened and Ina, her best friend, appeared, having heard about the scandal. She rushed to Jisoo's side and begged her not to do anything rash. Jisoo, with tears in her eyes, confessed that she couldn't endure this life anymore, that her husband would never stop until one of them was dead. Ina held her tightly and said that she was right about one thing. One of them had to go, but it didn't have to be her. Instead, Ina proposed something shocking, that they should put an end to him first. She explained that a few days earlier, she had met a mysterious man who claimed he could make people disappear for the right price. Jisoo was terrified by the idea. The years of psychological abuse had broken her spirit. Her husband had made her believe that everything was her fault. The front door opened again. Her husband had come home early, suspicion burning in his eyes. He demanded to know if someone else was in the house. Jisoo, desperate, insisted she was alone. He didn't believe her and his anger escalated. Desperate to save herself, Jisoo said it was a mistake, but he replied with one of his mottos, "Mistakes have consequences." Suddenly, Ina made a noise and her husband approached, convinced that someone was hiding there. Terrified, Jisoo tried to distract him, begging for a kiss and suggesting they go to bed instead. Fed up with her screams, he grabbed her by the neck and lashed out with brutal force, while Ina, trapped inside, listened helplessly to every sound, unable to intervene. What followed was another terrifying episode that poor Jisoo was forced to endure. After it was over, her husband left, and Ina came out to check on her friend, only to see the aftermath of his cruelty. She realized then that Jisoo wasn't just trapped, she was in mortal danger. Days passed and Jisoo's despair only deepened. Each morning she woke up wishing she could simply vanish from the world. She began to lose the will to keep living, but her husband discovered her at the last moment and intervened. At first, he panicked and thought of calling an ambulance, but then he realized that if the paramedics saw the marks on her body, he would be the one blamed. So instead, he performed CPR himself, forcing her back to consciousness. When she finally opened her eyes, gasping, he stared at her and said in a chilling voice, "You can't die without my permission." Jisoo begged him to remove the security cameras, threatening to try again if he didn't. He refused at first, so she grabbed a kitchen knife and pointed it toward her own neck. He managed to stop her just in time, but he realized she was serious. To avoid suspicion, he smashed the cameras, pretending it was a gesture of trust. But Jisoo knew this wasn't reconciliation. It was an opportunity. That moment marked the beginning of her plan. She finally understood that death wasn't her way out. Survival and revenge were. She had to destroy the monster before he destroyed her completely. Together, they started to devise a risky but clever strategy. She found a man who resembled the husband named Chang'an, an undocumented immigrant from China who lived without papers, family, or anyone who could trace him. In other words, a man who officially didn't exist. When Ina introduced him to Jisoo, she was shocked. Chang'an looked almost identical to Jisoo's husband. They realized that if they played their cards right, they could use him to take her husband's identity, disappear with all his money, and make the world believe he had fled the country. No body, no crime. A few days later, Ina met Chang'an again and made him an offer, an enormous sum of money if he agreed to return to China under someone else's name. Though hesitant, Chang'an admitted that he missed his family and said he needed some time to think. Meanwhile, the two friends began working on the next phase of their plan, finding a reason for Jisoo's husband to travel abroad. As if fate wanted to help, her husband soon discovered that Ina was friends with a wealthy client he desperately wanted to work with. Suddenly, his entire attitude changed. He became unusually charming, inviting Jisoo to dinner and even asking Ina to join them, pretending everything was perfectly normal. During the meal, he pulled Ina aside and told her in a low voice to stay out of their marriage. Couples should solve their problems on their own, he said, adding that there was one thing she could do to help, get him that business meeting. Ina, fearing for her friend, agreed. Using her gift of persuasion, she convinced the wealthy client to give him another chance, setting the stage for what would come next. Days later, Chang'an returned, ready to commit. The women gave him a complete makeover until he looked like Jisoo's husband's twin. Even the man's own sister wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. During this time, Jisoo's husband seemed unusually calm and satisfied. After achieving his business goals, his temper cooled temporarily and he stopped lashing out. But Jisoo knew this peace wouldn't last. When the day came, the two women drove into the mountains to dig the place that would become his grave. They didn't know that her husband had installed a GPS tracker in Jisoo's phone and could see her every move. He received a notification showing a plane ticket purchased under her wife's name. Realizing something was wrong, he raced to find her. Meanwhile, the two women were setting the stage to finally put an end to the nightmare once and for all. But he showed up earlier than expected, catching them completely off guard and forcing them to improvise. Jisoo tried to calm him down, desperately attempting to explain everything away, but he demanded answers, shouting for the truth, while Jisoo stood frozen, unable to speak. Ina stepped forward to protect her, and he realized they had been plotting against him, and his fury exploded. A violent struggle broke out, and they began to fight, but he never imagined that Ina knew jujitsu. She fought with everything she had, managing to hold him off for a moment, but he was wild, stronger than either of them had anticipated. In a final, desperate moment, Jisoo ended it all by striking him hard on the head. Later, Jisoo's neighbor, who had heard the noise, knocked on the door of their cabin, asking if everything was okay. But since the neighbor often heard shouting, she assumed it was just another one of the couple's arguments and left. Jisoo, shaking, wanted to surrender herself to the police, but Ina insisted that this was not murder, it was survival. Ina and Jisoo began the most dangerous part of their plan, covering their tracks and making the world believe her husband had simply vanished. Chang'an arrived at their apartment, ready to step into his new identity. The women dressed him in the man's designer clothes, styled his hair, and gave him the same cologne. The resemblance was uncanny. If someone had walked in at that moment, they would have sworn Jisoo's husband was still alive. To make the illusion complete, Ina instructed him to take out the trash while carrying a suitcase, the one that contained the secret they needed to hide forever. They made sure every security camera in the building captured the footage. Then, using the husband's ID, he went to the bank and withdrew all the money from his private accounts. Later at the airport, Ina handed Chang'an the man's phone. "Make sure you turn it on when you land in China," she said. "That way the authorities can track it." Chang'an nodded, thanked them for the money, and promised that they would never see him again. For Jisoo and Ina, it was finally over, or so they thought. Next came phase 2, getting rid of the body. For that reason, they returned to the mountain where they had dug the hole and buried the body deep in the forest, but Jisoo still felt filthy, like her hands were stained. After covering the grave, the friends vowed to stay united. The hardest phase was next. The questions, the suspicion. Jisoo said she didn't care. Freedom was finally within reach. Before driving back, they toasted their new start. From now on, Jisoo would be herself again. The next morning, both their phones lit up with a notification. Chang'an had landed safely in China and reunited with his family. Still, even with her abuser gone, Jisoo couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her. Days later, her husband's company called. He hadn't shown for days and had vanished with a lot of money. His sister asked where he was and why he wasn't answering. Jisoo said that her husband had left with his passport and luggage, and she hadn't heard from him since. To everyone, it looked like a classic case of corporate fraud followed by an escape abroad. Her mother, devastated, blamed Jisoo. She said Jisoo should have stopped him, or at least warned them. Meanwhile, the sister discovered surveillance footage of Chang'an with his family in China, which only deepened her belief that her brother had been living a double life. Because he had a reputation as a womanizer, the story seemed plausible. When Jisoo visited the company to clear things up, she was informed that her husband was officially accused of embezzlement, and that, to protect the firm's image, she would be dismissed as well. But deep down, Jisoo knew this was all part of the plan. Everything was unfolding exactly as they intended. Outside the office, the sister advised her to keep a low profile until things calmed down. Then Jisoo stood in front of a mirror, looking at her reflection. Her body still bore the marks of her past, but for the first time, she saw someone new. She decided to start over completely. She bought clothes she actually liked, went out to dinner with Ina, and smiled freely for the first time in years. That night, Ina reflected on her own mother's suffering. how, like Jisoo, she had been trapped in a violent marriage. That's why she confronted her father, telling him she no longer wanted to see her mother suffer. He laughed bitterly and told her that she would regret disrespecting him once he was gone. Ina replied, "You're wrong. When you die, no one will miss you." Meanwhile, Jisoo still couldn't shake the fear of being hurt again. She wanted to get a job and move out to finally free herself from the trauma of her past. Ina decided to help by taking her to Chinatown to meet President Chen, a powerful businessman. During the meeting, Chen initially told Jisoo he didn't want to hire her, but Jisoo, firm and composed, replied that she was willing to work as hard as it took to earn her place. Impressed by her courage and beauty, Chen eventually decided to give her the job. Jisoo thought the nightmare was finally over until she came home from work and saw a familiar face waiting in the dark. It was Chang'an. He had come back. Smiling coldly, he told her that he already knew everything. The man they thought had vanished had in fact uncovered the entire truth. After arriving in China, Chang'an had managed to unlock Jisoo's late husband's phone, piecing together all their messages, calls, and plans. He now knew exactly what they had done, but Chang'an was no innocent man. He was, in fact, a dangerous criminal with ties to organized crime. He revealed that he had returned not out of mercy or guilt, but to blackmail Jisoo. He demanded $3 million and gave her 5 days to come up with it. Otherwise, he would expose everything: the death of the husband, the fake identity, and the money transfers. Panicked, Jisoo tried to reason with him, but Chang'an made it clear he didn't care about her fear. "You've killed a man, and now it's time to pay." On his way out of the building, the security guard recognized him and mentioned that his mother had asked to be notified if he ever returned. Chang'an knew he had come back to the country illegally, and the fear of being exposed drove him to silence the man for good before disappearing into the night. Later, Ina found out about everything and discovered that her friend was desperately selling all her jewelry to get some money. Meanwhile, Jisoo's mother-in-law also heard rumors about Chang'an's return and ordered her daughter, the police officer, to investigate. When the sister reviewed the surveillance footage, she saw Chang'an and immediately erased the evidence, fearing it could ruin her career. Chang'an went to Ina's workplace. He told Ina that he wanted the money and that if she didn't cooperate, he would ruin both her and her friend. Chang'an met with an old colleague for drinks, but his violent temper and reckless behavior caused chaos at the bar. The incident forced President Chen to come and take responsibility for his employee. While helping him, Chen noticed the phone that once belonged to Jisoo's husband and began piecing things together. Realizing that Chang'an wasn't who he claimed to be, Chen confronted him. A heated fight broke out, ending with Chen warning him to stay away from his employees. Afterwards, Chen called Jisoo, connecting all the dots. He now understood that she and Ina had followed his earlier suggestion to eliminate her abuser. Meanwhile, Jisoo opened her husband's hidden safe and found stacks of cash inside, but even that wasn't enough to meet Chang'an's impossible demand. At the same time, the extortionist discovered that the women had gone to the mountains on the exact day the husband had died. He followed the trail and uncovered everything. Enraged, he told Ina that unless they handed him the money, he would dig up the body and expose them. Determined to protect her friend, Ina tried to handle him on her own, warning Jisoo to stay away. But fate was once again working against them. Jisoo's sister-in-law saw Ina nearby and immediately recognized her as the woman she'd once seen with her brother. She decided to follow her and was shocked to find out that her brother had supposedly returned to the country, though something about him seemed different. She began to suspect the truth. When her colleague mentioned that new evidence had surfaced showing Jisoo's sister-in-law leaving a parking garage the night of the disappearance, she dismissed it as coincidence. But then her mother called, saying that her son, Jisoo's husband, had contacted her asking for money. That's when the police officer realized something was very wrong. The man pretending to be her brother wasn't him at all. Meanwhile, Ina and Chang'an's confrontation escalated, leading to a devastating car crash that left them both injured. The sister-in-law, who had been secretly following them, arrived shortly after. And here she discovered that the man pretending to be her brother is actually Chang'an, and she realizes the horrifying truth. Her brother never left the country. He was killed. To protect her career, the corrupt sister covers everything up, locks Chang'an in her car, and decides to frame Jisoo for murder. The sister said she knew where the body was buried, and Jisoo begged her not to involve Ina. The officer agreed on one condition. Jisoo had to take her own life and leave a written confession claiming everything was her fault. That night, Jisoo drove to the mountains, sat in her car, and prepared to end her life. But fate intervened. Ina found her just in time and pulled her out. Later, Ina confronted the police officer. The woman warned them that she would destroy their lives to protect her own career. Ina, fearless, vowed to expose her corruption. The officer laughed, saying that no one would ever believe them. Jisoo woke up realizing there was no escape. Everything was spiraling. She begged Ina to save herself, but her friend refused. "We started this together," she said. "We'll end it together." Soon after, Ina was arrested. The corrupt officer had pulled strings to accuse her of accepting bribes. Even so, Ina remained calm. She had powerful allies too. She contacted the minister directly and revealed that Jisoo's husband had been a violent criminal who fled to China with stolen money. The revelation ruined the police officer's career overnight. Desperate, she went home, only to find her mother trembling in shock. Inside the garage, her mother had discovered Chang'an and, believing he was her son's killer, attacked him in a fit of rage, ending his life. When the officer arrived, her mother confessed what she had done. Panicked, the officer decided to use the body to her advantage. She would pass it off as her brother's and finally close the case. But Ina, relentless, tracked her down and intercepted her car. She rammed it from behind, forcing it to stop in the middle of the street, revealing to everyone that a corpse was hidden inside. The crowd gathered, and in that moment, all her lies began to unravel. For Jisoo, the chaos meant one thing: an end. She was done running. She turned herself into the police and confessed everything. Ina followed soon after, taking full responsibility for her part in the husband's death. The media exploded with the story of two women who had killed an abusive man because no one had ever helped them. It was revealed that the husband's family had long known the truth, but used their influence to bury the case and paint Jisoo as unstable. President Chen refused to abandon them. He hired the best lawyers and ensured they had a fair trial. During the hearings, Jisoo spoke calmly, explaining that her marriage had been a nightmare and that she had tried every possible way to stop the abuse. "In the end, one of us had to die. I know that doesn't make it right, but I had no choice," she said. Ina also took the stand. She admitted that she had grown up hiding in closets, pretending not to hear her father hurting her mother, thinking that silence meant safety. Violence isn't normal. Looking away makes monsters stronger. She said she couldn't save Mrs. K, but she wouldn't let Jisoo meet the same fate. "What I did was wrong," she concluded, "but I'm ready to face the consequences." In the audience, Ina's mother wept. Hearing her daughter's words, she found the courage she never had. She left her husband and told her daughter she was finally free. "You did the right thing," Ina told her. "You were brave." Time passed. The trial ended. Because the women had cooperated fully, their sentences were reduced. When Jisoo was finally released, President Chen and Ina were waiting for her outside the prison gates. Both women had criminal records now, making it almost impossible to rebuild their lives. But Chen offered them a second chance. He took them to Thailand, where they began working for his company, living quietly under new identities. There, surrounded by sunshine and peace, they started again. For the first time, they were truly free. Free from fear, from guilt, and from the past that once consumed them. Their scars remained, but they no longer defined them. Now they know what true love really feels like. The love of friendship, of those who stand by you no matter what. Their smiles are endless now, and their souls are filled with light.